Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's The Hindu Newspaper Analysis, where we shall be taking a look at the important articles which have appeared in today's the Delhi edition of 15th January 2024, both for your prelims as well as for your mains requirement. Now, before we move into the topics that we are going to discuss for today, a reminder for all of you that we have basically launched an initiative to carry out one-on-one counseling sessions. So any of the candidates who are interested in pursuing the career towards civil services, any of the doubts that you have which requires any kind of guidance so as to how to sharpen your strategy for preparation, what to do, what not to do for the preparation, please do not worry about any of the external factors. The link and the description below has got a Google form. Just fill out that Google form, fill out the details, and our counselor will reach out to you and you can basically solve all the queries thereby. So that is the gentle announcement. Now, after that, we move to the topics that we are going to discuss for today. So today in total, we are going to discuss around 7 topics. Out of them, 4 of them are going to be discussed in detail for the mains perspective and 3 of them are going to be discussed for your prelims perspective. So the first topic will be the prohibitive gains, one of the articles which have appeared in the editorial page of the paper today. Now this is about the CPI and the CPI numbers about food grains and cereals. So while here we shall not be concentrating about the number per se, but we shall be addressing the larger trends and what do those larger trends indicate? How does that larger trend have the potential to impact the national economy for that matter? So this is going to be relevant for your GS paper 3. Then the delusion of eliminating the last terrorist. This is again an article which had appeared in the editorial section. This talks basically about the tangibles that the security forces in the valley, they see by eliminating the terrorist, whether that is a correct approach or what should be the ideal measured approach. So whatever is the perspective of the article here represented, that is something that we are going to take up for the discussion. Then regulating India's online gaming industry. This is going to be relevant both for your GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3 because India's online gaming industry has been in news quite significantly for the past few months. Now here, this is an article by a member of parliament and this talks about the need for regulation for this gaming industry. Why is it that gaming industries across the globe have the potential to basically impact your economic setup and give rise to a black economy? So that is something that we are going to discuss. Then global surgery and its accessibility. So what is this concept of global surgery? Why is it required? Because when we think about surgery, we have a very different preconceived notion in our mind. So what is that global surgery about? Very, very relevant for your GS paper 3 again. Then we are going to discuss few of the topics for your prelims perspective. PM JANMAN Abhiyan. Basically, it is for the Janjati Adivasi Mahabhiyan. So for that, funds have been released. So we shall take this particular small snippet of the article to discuss about this JANMAN. Then rising sea level and the Ganga Sagar Mela. So the rising sea level and the coastal erosion, they have dampened the mood and the spirit around the Ganga Sagar Mela, which is typically held around the time of Sankranti. So why is it that this is causing a problem? What are the temporary solutions? Are these solutions applicable only in India or is there a global pattern that we observe? So this is also relevant for your prelims. And Rashtriya Vigyaan Puraskar. The government has basically asked for the details for that Rashtriya Vigyaan Puraskar. So few of the intricacies for your prelims we are going to discuss here as well. So without further ado, let us start the discussion with the first topic of the day. And the first topic is the prohibitive gains. Now, this particular topic which has appeared in the editorial section, this is in page 6 of the Delhi edition of the newspaper. So this talks about, if I have to talk about the relevance in GS paper. So few of these snippets can be asked in the prelims also, but otherwise mostly to be asked in GS paper 3. We shall be discussing which are the portions which are relevant for your prelims here. So prohibitive gains. This article basically talks about how the prices of the food and the consumer items have been increasing for the past year almost for a past year and a half. Now, for the month of December, the data pointers which have been released, they indicate a rise in prices of the cereals, right? So the cereals and food grains, there the inflation has been close to around 10% on a consistent, 9 to 10% consistently. Now, more surprisingly, due to the rise of rice and wheat and these prices, the pulses prices, etc., here, majority of the common Indian household, the rural household also, they had started consuming millets. The government is also promoting millets. Now, the surprising factor of this is that in the month of December, even millets have shown a tremendous uptick in terms of the prices, in terms of the amount of inflation that is observed in the category of jowar and bajra in particular. Inflation has been significant. When we talk about jowar and bajra, there also inflation is significant. Here by 63 basis points, and in the case of bajra by almost 106 basis points. On top of that, there has been an inflation for rice and wheat that we have talked about, also about fruits and vegetables. Now, here, we are not going to concentrate on the data pointers here, because the data pointer 63 basis points, 101 basis point, 9% inflation, 10% inflation, at the end of this entire financial cycle, nobody is going to ask you about the number in particular, that what was the data pointer for the month of December or for the month of November. But we are going to observe a trend. Why is it that the prices are rising at such a significant rate? Now, this rise in prices of the food grains is something that we have been observing as a consistent phenomena ever since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out. So almost for 2 years now, there has been a scenario where wheat prices in particular have faced a significant amount of stress because of huge amount of production which would normally come from Ukraine, the Russia-Ukraine part. After all, that region of the lowlands, the European lowlands, they serve as the bread basket of the region of Europe. So they basically turn out to be one of the largest producers of wheat across the globe. Now, in such a scenario and such a circumstance, if that supply chain gets disrupted, obviously because of the war, then the wheat prices have faced a kind of a sticky wicket there. On top of that, when we consider the other large suppliers, in India is one of the large suppliers where we end up producing, as per the estimate of 2023, it is the advanced estimate obviously. So as per the advanced estimate of 2023, India was on tune to produce close to around 112 million metric tons of wheat. So if we are producing this much, still we are facing the problem of inflation. Why is it so? That is because, first of all, our productivity in itself has suffered a decline. In the past couple of years, the productivity of wheat and rice in India have suffered a significant amount of decline. And why is that? That is largely aided by the factors of climate change. For example, in the year 2023, and in fact in the year 2022 as well, India suffered a massive loss of the wheat crop due to heat waves. Generally, heat wave conditions are prevalent in the month of April and May. But in the year 2022, as was the case in later part of 2021 also, you had the heat wave conditions occurring directly in the month of March itself. Now, the wheat crop is a kind of a rabi crop. Basically, in India, it is referred to as the winter crop. Now for the Rabi crop, that is wheat, here we take the example of wheat. So the sowing is done when? In the month of November, December. At that point of time, they require little amount of moisture, they require little amount of rains. That is largely provided in the northern part of the country with the help of the western disturbances. But then the harvesting season, harvesting is observed in the month of March, April, and sometimes even May. Now, it is this particular month and these couple of months which have been problematic since the year 2021 itself. Because wheat as a crop, I am sure you would know the properties of wheat crop and what are the conditions it requires to grow. So at the time of sowing, at the time of initial growing period, it does require some amount of moisture. Lower temperature will always favor them. But at the time of ripening and harvesting, wheat requires bright sunshine and absolute dry weather conditions. If dry weather conditions are not there, the grains, they end up remaining damper. They remain slightly wet. And when you go to sell out wheat in the market at any of the godowns or at any of the APMCs, basically the price that is given out to you for the wheat that you have brought in, it is based upon how damp the wheat is or how dry the wheat is. If the moisture content of the grain is found to be below 20%, that is the wheat grain which is given adequate amount of pricing. Otherwise, you are given a lower amount of price for the wheat that you sell. Now, in the year 2021, if you observe the trend, why is it that we are experiencing reduced production? In the year 2021, during this month of March and April, you had unseasonal rains. Western disturbances, which generally disappear by the month of March, or they become very diminished by the month of March in 2021, they brought in additional amount of rainfall and thunderstorms even during the month of March and April, destroying many of the still standing crops of wheat. In the year 2022, you had unusual heat waves. Due to which, our production of wheat, which by the end of year 2020 stood close to around 110 million metric tons. Think about it, after 3 years, we have reached almost that stage. So we had suffered a loss of acreage. We have suffered a loss of the standing crops as well. Plus, to add on to the fact that we continue to supply this wheat in the form of the food grains that the government supplies to a larger section of population. Ever since the time of the COVID, we have been supplying, the government, the state and the central governments have been supplying wheat to the citizens at a larger amount. So that automatically puts pressure on the existing stock, which pushes up prices. Now, other cereal that you consider, the cereal of rice, let's suppose. Now, rice is a kharif crop. Kharif crop. Now, rice is something where our production, as per the estimates of 2023, the advanced estimates of 2023, they stand somewhere close to around 127 million metric tons. The situation is much better than wheat, but you have to consider that rice is grown in much larger area as compared to wheat. The eastern portion, the eastern coastal areas, as well as the regions of the northeast and the western coastal areas, their rice is grown because the rainfall is received prominently. Now, this rice is grown immediately after the monsoon rains. So it is a kharif crop which is dependent on the availability of rainfall by the monsoons. Now, for the past 2 years also, if you have not observed the past trend of monsoon, if you immediately recall what happened in 2023 and 2022, you would remember that the month of June, July and August have been very sporadic in terms of the distribution of rainfall. One of these months is very dry. Generally, June tends to be very dry. So the people wait that let the rains come, then we will sow these crops. And then July brings excessive amount of rainfall, flooding all across. So not only is the sowing delayed, but also many of the farmlands are lost due to the floods. So that is where acreage has not increased. Cultivable land under rice cultivation has not increased to that proportion. And there also the productivity has declined because of these unseasonal rains, etc. So this is one of the factors. The other factor aiding that inflation is basically the supply chain logistics. Ever since that war in Ukraine broke out, the prices of crude, etc., have been on the uptick ever since. Consistently, the prices have been rising. Now, it has been 100 days since an all-out Israeli attack on the Gaza Strip that has basically earmarked 100 days. So again, there's a situation of war in the Middle East. Along with that, oil tankers are being attacked by the Houthi rebels. So the entire fuel prices, they have gone drastically up. So here, if you think about the causes, one of the causes that you can basically attribute to is the fact of climate change. Second is rising fuel prices. Okay. Now these rising fuel prices, they have increased the logistics cost. Increased logistics cost. Now what about vegetables? Vegetables have also indicated a sharp increase. Now why is that? So basically, the rise and fall in prices of vegetables is largely seasonal in nature. And seasonal in nature means that you will have certain months where the prices will absolutely plummet to the floor, and in certain months the prices will hit the roof. So for that, you have a lack of enough cold storage structures and enough storage locations across the country where you can have a buffer stock available. So in the case of fruits and vegetables, here you do need availability of. So first of all, you have to be aware that it is seasonal inflation. And why will you have seasonal inflation? That in certain months the farmers will get very low prices and in certain months very high prices. Lack of enough storage structures. And cold storage also, and supply chain logistics, the bottlenecks in that, due to which many of these crops or fruits and vegetables, they get destroyed, they get damaged by the time that they reach the consumers, that is us. So that is where the existing prices go up. Now why is it a cause of concern? Ideally, if the prices increase by slight amount, inflation is not something which is to be worried about. It indicates that the economy is also expanding if the prices are under control. But if consistently the foods and cereals and the food grains, they continue to have an inflation of close to around 10%, it is indeed a worrisome trend. Why? So let us understand the impact, the cyclical impact of it. And it has basically got various different stages of impact. First of all, coming directly at the level of the consumer. So if a consumer spends more in terms of access to food grains, because food grains are something that nobody can compromise, that I will only get 1 kg of rice today because the price is very high. Whatever is the requirement of the household, you have to get that. So if you spend more on food grains, spending more on food grains basically means little left, less disposable income. And when you have less disposable income, means what? You will not, if you have little surplus, you won't go out in the market to buy a refrigerator or, let's suppose, an air cooler or a motorbike. You won't do that. Why? Because little amount of money that you have, you will save it up. So there, you will have less demand in the market. Less demand in the market basically will infer to what? Here we are talking about the rural market. Now, that would mean lesser supply requirement in the urban market. Urban market. Lesser supply requirement in the urban market would basically mean what? Basically, the industries who are manufacturing these refrigerators, motorcycles, etc., they won't be running to full capacity. So, underutilization of capacity in the industries. Underutilization of capacity in industries. So, when you have underutilization, so basically you don't need that many people to work for you. So this will eventually lead to unemployment. Unemployment on the rise. So think about it, even in the urban market, people, if they are unemployed in large amounts, so then what will they do? Will they be spending more money on the consumer items? No. They will be saving the money, or whatever money they are having, they will be using that, consuming that for healthcare needs, food requirements. So that will in a way impact the lesser demand in the urban environment. Demand in economy, this time urban economy. And that is a feedback cycle. Lesser demand in economy means the industries will cut short their labor force further, and this will continue to unravel. So that is where the rising food grain prices have an immense impact at the national level and at the national economic setup. So that is something that one has to be aware of. Other than that, when prices of grains such as pulses, millets, when these rise up, people won't buy them. People will buy some alternatives. And you have to understand, in a largely vegetarian diet that our country has, if pulses, etc. are not available, that significantly means lack of protein intake and lack of nutrient intake. Now, for the adult population, they can still cope up with it, even though they also start suffering from various different types of diseases. But when it comes to the younger population, malnutrition and other forms of undernourishment, they will be on the rise. Already the Global Hunger Report, which is mired in its own sets of controversies to be acceptable or not acceptable, but still, it indicates towards some reality that we still have a major challenge to tackle malnutrition in our country. The number of people who are malnourished in our country, that is very, very high, and we need to tackle those numbers. So how do you do that? By providing them nutritious food. But if the pulses prices, the millets prices, etc., they go up, what will you do? So that is why we need a price stabilization. You had a price stabilization fund which has been created for certain cereals such as pulses and certain other food items. But that is a very temporary phenomena, and that is a very temporary cure. Here we are talking about long-term systemic solutions. So how do you do that? You go for climate resilient crop cultivation and basically sustainable crop cultivation. So growing rice in those areas only which are suitable, not promoting the growth of rice in areas such as Punjab, Haryana, Western UP, which can further degrade the environment in that area. Then secondly, ensuring enough number of storage structures, cold storage structures to be built along a network across the country, so that it should not only be the case that few mandis will have the availability of onions. In rest of the parts of the country, the prices go through the roof. So there will be hoarding, black marketing, etc., which will immediately kick in. And there's only a way in which you can control that. So all these deliverables need to be brought into action so that we can have some respite to the consistent rising prices. Having said that, here you come across the term CPI, Consumer Price Index. So Consumer Price Index, that is going to be relevant for your prelims. So what is that Consumer Price Index? So that CPI is the measuring index of the changes in the price level of consumer goods and services brought out by the households. You have the entire basket. I will show you the basket of it also. The price reference here for measuring the inflation is considered to be 2012. This is again relevant for your prelims. Here you get statement based question that the base year is 2004-5 or 2012, etc. So multi-statement kind of question has been asked by UPSC previously in the prelims also. So this is the example of the price basket of CPI when we consider a combined CPI. So CPI is also of various different types. Without going into the significant details, you broadly can consider you have CPI rural, you have CPI urban, you have the CPI combined. So this is the basket of different weights of CPI combined. Here you will see that food and beverage has got maximum amount of weightage associated, close to around 45.3%. of weightage is given to food and beverage. Out of that, around 10%, roughly around 10% is given to cereals and the other products. Miscellaneous also gains close to around 35%. Then you have housing, fuel and light, clothing and footwear around 6%, fuel and light around 6 to 7%. Housing in combined is again given a weightage of around 10%. When you go to CPI rural, in the CPI rural, these food and food grains, their proportion increases to almost 54%, which tells you the importance of maintaining a lower price in the rural areas, because the larger consumer items that they buy out, or the larger number of products that they buy from the market, are going to be food and food products. When you go to the urban market, in the CPI for the urban market, the weightage for housing substantially increases, the food and beverage weightage slightly reduces. So that is how slight moderation and modification is done in order to bring out the CPI numbers. So you should be aware that what this CPI is, that the CPI has got the largest weightage associated to food and beverages, and in that also cereals and products, they have a larger share. In the rural CPI, you have more than 50% weightage given to food and food products. Okay. Now moving to the second article, which is again has appeared in the editorial section, the delusion of eliminating the last terrorist. So this article is largely about the conundrum about elimination of terrorism. Terrorism is a kind of a plague, is a scourge that we have been facing for decades now. So the memories of the entire governance system, of the framework mechanism, everything is imbibed in what terrorism has done to us. So as a consequence of that, oftentimes when we talk about the tangibles, what are the tangible benefits? How do you measure progress in terms of combating terrorism from one year to the next? If you ask yourself and if you ponder about it, then you will come to the same conclusion that our armed forces and the government comes to, is by measuring how many terrorists have we eliminated in the year 2022 or 2023 or 2021. So the number of terrorists eliminated, the number of cross-border infiltrations which have been foiled, that is always used as a metric, as a parameter to gauge the success of the forces, the security forces against the terrorist infrastructure and the entire terrorism and insurgency, particularly when it comes to the region of Jammu Kashmir. So here, this article basically stands to argue that, look, that cannot be the end. That cannot be the only measurable. Why? Because that can lead to oftentimes wrong goal setting. And that can lead to malpractices. How? As has been the case, few instances have come up previously also by this at the hands of security forces while combating the impact of Naxalism or the problem of Naxalism along the Red Corridor in the interior part of the country, or combating terrorism in the northeastern states in the region of Jammu Kashmir. There have been instances which have been reported of excesses which have been carried out on the larger civilian population with the prime aim to increase these numbers of terrorists killed. Very recently, you had a very high-level visit where the Raksha Mantri himself visited the bereaved families in the region of Jammu Kashmir to basically assuage them of the loss, where you had one sad instance where few of the terrorists basically launched an attack on the security forces on the Chinar Corps, and in retaliation, the Rashtriya Rifles basically they caused out certain amount of counter-terrorism activities, due to which it was alleged that few of the civilians were killed. And that is where the Raksha Mantri made that very famous speech where he said that the purpose of the defense forces has to be to win the hearts and minds of the people. So since that point of time, for the past month and a half, this has been in debate about how to improve the conditions, how to improve the situation on ground and bring that terrorism network under control. This article also argues about the fact that significantly in the past, there have been years when the number of terrorists killed have been much lower, but those years have been peaceful. And there have been years when the number of terrorists killed have been very, very high, but those years have been very violent in the valley. So it is a sort of decoupling. So here, in the race to have the tangible outcome, how to have that tangible outcome. So basically, the ministry and the government, the armed forces, when they represent the numbers and the entire data point of what they have done in the last year, the number of terrorists neutralized. That is a major figure. Other than that, also number of cross-border infiltration attempts neutralized. Now here, this article basically stands to argue that these are not relevant measures, but at the same time, you have to also be mindful of the fact that simultaneously on a day-to-day basis, the armed forces, particularly on the ground, if you talk to them, if you have a chance to counteract with them, or if you have a chance to basically have a conversation with them, you will be realizing the fact that on a day-to-day basis, there are many people who are nudged back into the life of normalcy by these armed forces. They are supported, funding is provided for the people to shun that path of terrorism, of separatism, and come back to the life of normalcy. But those numbers obviously cannot be revealed, because how do you substantiate it? That, okay, this person I have permanently moved to the scenario of normalcy. You don't have a tangible for that, do you? So that is why, due to the lack of tangibles, those efforts oftentimes take the background. Now, these particular numbers, they start doing rounds on the social media. Now, this article also argues that in years when there are lesser number of terrorist incidents, there, in order to indicate some kind of advantage that the security forces have made, some kind of upper hand that they have gained, they tend to fudge these numbers, and more dangerously, sometimes they also cross over the limits. And there are some extrajudicial killings which have happened in the past as alleged. Now, obviously, the security forces, they take up their own due course of action there. So what should be the way forward? What is it that we should do moving ahead in order to have actual tangible benefit in the valley? So, first of all, confidence building measure. How do you build confidence amongst the masses? So more interaction, right, amongst the populace and the administration. So a better administrative population interaction, more transparency, between administration and population. This is one of those. So that one feels free to express their grievances. That is paramount. For any citizenry to feel satisfied with a system, there has to be a system whereby, or there has to be a mechanism whereby they can express their grievances, free of reprisals, free of that burden that what will happen to us as a cause of that. Now, augmenting the capacity of the state machinery, this article also highlights the fact that there have been instances where the armed forces have basically almost wiped out the entire terrorist infrastructure across the region of the valley. But the state machinery, due to lack of its capacity, due to lack of an overarching structure, they have not succeeded in maintaining that kind of a ground control. And that is where the terrorism again rises up like a phoenix. And there have been various instances. 2009-10 has been one of those. Before that also there have been multiple such instances. So that is why you need to augment the capacity of the state machinery, proper intelligence sharing, and accountability needs to be fixed. Political process needs to be ingrained to the grassroots, as the central government and the Supreme Court, both of them have indicated that the political processes need to be restored as early as possible. So there also people, they do get a kind of a sense that, okay, our views, our opinions are also something which matters. So that is where the holding of the elections, the restoration of the statehood, all these political grievances that have been building up, they need to be addressed as soon as the normalcy is gained back. Because recently we have seen that after a long period of gap and a long period of calm, there has been an upsurge in violent activities in the region, particularly in the Rajouri-Poonch sector, which has not witnessed that much amount of violence in the past. So once that entire piece is maintained, after that, these political processes, they need to be ingrained, and the system needs to evolve whereby this is an automatic process, not as per the whims and the fantasies of any other particular, let's suppose, a group or a pressure organization, anything like that. Success stories where there have been cases where the armed forces have basically managed to bring people back to the mainstream, and those people, they have thrived in life, they have basically managed to bring semblance to their life. Those success stories need to be highlighted. So that information and communication mechanism needs to be strengthened. Only then can goodwill spread. Goodwill does not spread by any kind of advertisement, etc. that you do. Goodwill always spreads from word to word basis, or from one person to another person by the word of mouth. That is how the goodwill will spread, and that is the requirement. And one has to understand what also has been the principle highlighted by Mahatma Gandhi multiple number of times, that end is, or the end result should not only be the goal. Means to achieve that end result is equally as important. And that is same thing that even our Raksha Mantri highlighted in his visit to Jammu Kashmir recently, where he said that we have to win the hearts and the minds of the people. And that is what brings me to the final point of this particular article, where in crux, if you analyze this article in one sentence or a couple of sentences, it will be about that, look, as the armed forces of the powerful country, you cannot have an aim that the last terrorist in the valley I will kill, and then terrorism will be wiped out. That is like treating the symptoms of a disease. That, okay, there is a disease which is causing maybe bleeding, maybe cough, cold, etc. So you are treating the cough, cold and the bleeding. You are not basically addressing the main disease. Here, cross-border terrorism is one of the major factors where India has to a certain extent succeeded in eliminating that factor of the negotiating table, where Pakistan used to bring that cross-border terrorism as a means to bring India to the negotiating table. So we have had our successes, but we cannot end up measuring our successes with the help of these tangibles. We have to look forward to the intangibles, and we have to look at the social indicators of progress. Maybe one can move ahead with regular measurement of these social indicators of progress. What is the level of average education gained, of the literacy level? Is it increasing or not? Is the amount of healthcare services provided, is that increasing or not? Those intangibles over a period of time will indicate a real progress as compared to the elimination of the last terrorist who is hiding somewhere. So that is the crux of this article. Moving ahead to the next article. Now this is regulating India's online gaming industry. Now, for the past few months, there has been a lot of debate, discussion, furor, whatever word you consider, about the regulations which have been brought in for the online gaming industry. The government had increased the GST and the taxes on the online gaming industry, due to which few of the players went out of business as well. There was a lot of criticism that online gaming industry needs to be free of regulations. But this article by a member of parliament who is also a part of the parliamentary standing committee, this article highlights that it is not so plain and simple. Online gaming is no longer only about placing your bets on certain cases, winning the amount and going back home. There have been a slew of various instances which have indicated that particularly the youthful population, they are impacted by this gaming industry quite significantly and quite deeply for that matter. On one hand, we can boast all around the world that we have amongst the largest youthful population. Around 65% of our population is roughly below the age of 35 years. So in the coming years, we will have one of the largest workforce, maybe one of the most capable workforce, if we work towards it, the world has ever seen. But at the same time, you cannot end up ignoring those endless cases of extortion, suicides, mental trauma, addiction and other cases where the young ones, many of the cases even the tiny tots, they are basically influenced by this online gaming industry. So how big is this online gaming industry in India? Does it really need regulation? If yes, how? And what can be the example? So first of all, the status of the gaming industry in India. So this you can, in one word, you can summarize it by the fact that close to around 373 million potential gamers are present in the country. 373 million. A large share of our population. And think about it. This is largely, in terms of demographic division, this is largely the youthful population. Now, it is not only capped at 373 million potential gamers. You have to understand that India has got 692 million users of internet, which is second globally. And in terms of the amount of time which is spent on mobile apps, India stands 8th. Now, Indians, when they spend time on the mobile apps, around 82% of the time which is spent, 82% of the time is on media and entertainment, including social media and entertainment. Which brings about the issues of social media, its violations, etc. But that is not the point of consideration here. The point is that in recent times there have been various instances which have come to light where it has been observed that AI, artificial intelligence generated videos, AI based videos of which are very fake. These fake videos of various celebrities promoting these many of the times illegal gaming channels has become very popular. Now, the gullible amongst the larger population, they are easily taken in by the lure of this gaming industry. That, okay, I have to give in rupees 100, I might end up earning rupees 1 lakh or 1 crore at the end of it. That is the lure. Now here, fair enough. Everybody knows that it is a risk-taking endeavor. They go there with their own risk in mind. So if this gaming industry would have performed only up till this level, there would hardly have been any point of concern. This gaming industry is growing in India at an annual rate, average annual rate of close to around 27%. Most of them are the domestic startup ecosystems, growing at a tremendous rate of around 27 to 30%, which is estimated to add value of close to around $300 billion to the Indian GDP by the year 2026-27. So here, what is the problem? The problem basically is that due to the lack of regulations, due to the fact that in the name of online gaming industry, you have multiple international illegal gaming dens and illegal gaming platforms which have started doing the rounds. As per the estimates, every year $100 billion of money goes to the international gaming platforms illegally. Now think about it. How much amount of this money would be a resultant of money laundering or the black money generated from the system? That is where it is a point of concern. And the estimates by the Parliamentary Standing Committee indicate that the loss to exchequer, that is the government, the loss to the government due to the lack of proper regulations in the gaming industry is close to around $45 billion a year. Think about this $45 billion per year. It basically has the potential to bring forward, or in order to come up with many of the creative social welfare schemes and to benefit the larger section of the population. We are losing this annually. So here, the concerns. The first concern is addiction. Mental trauma and suicides have come to the fore, where you have many of the teenagers nowadays who get embroiled in so much amount of debt at the hand of these illegal gaming platforms. Because understand, in that wider mushroom of that gaming platform, few of them are running professionally and properly, and many of them are basically running illegally without proper regulations, without proper registration. So for them to torture, in a way mental torture, any of the individuals is very easy and free of any accountability, and due to which many of the teenagers have been found to be committing suicide. Now this is something that we as a society, we as a country need to pay heed to. On top of that, in the name of this, financial frauds are on the rise. Then privacy and data security concerns, money laundering, threat to national security, growth of illegal offshore and betting markets, all of these are on the rise. How is it that it is a threat to national security? First of all, the moment that you start promoting a black economy, because that is what these illegal gaming platforms are doing, and lack of regulation has allowed them to grow. So that is when the amount of money which changes hand can be redirected to drug usage, to smuggling and other activities also. So that is where it is indeed a threat. Now IMF in a report had basically said that in those countries where the per capita income is low and there is lack of enough regulation, in those countries in particular, there is always a tendency to be pulled towards that black economy. Per capita income is low, there is always a lure, and the regulations are not stringent enough to catch hold of those people who infringe the law. So that means immediately there will be people who would be subverting the existing rules and regulations to do whatever they want. So that is on the rise in India. So what do we need to do? So proper regulation. Regulation can be of various types. The government had basically talked about self-regulation. That let these companies, because most of them are startups, and the government did not want to immediately disturb the apple cart and immediately disturb the entire ecosystem. So they imposed a GST of close to around 28%, which caused a huge amount of furor. But on top of that, they talked about self-regulation. Now, self-regulation in itself will be having various different pushes and pulls. Self-regulation can in itself have various pressure groups influencing that. So this needs to have a government oversight. And here the example is given, a government view and regulation. Supervision in simple terms. Government supervision needs to be there. Now, here the example has been given of the case of UK or Britain. Now in UK, for a quite considerable amount of time, there have been various different betting platforms, gaming platforms, where people do indulge in these gaming practices freely, and they do it regularly. Now these are open to official regulations and audits are held. That is where you have had instances where the regulator have had the capacity to find certain of the cases of these platforms where they were going for unfavorable and unsustainable practices, malpractices in general. There the fines were to the tune of around 200 to 300 million pounds. So you can think about it, that if you have these strict regulations, if you impose a fine to the tune of 200 million pounds on someone, they are bound to follow protocol and regulations from the next time. So over a period of many years, now the UK gaming industry has basically sanitized itself of all these various different malpractices. That is the need of the hour. And those regulations, imposition of fines, that needs to be done. Imposition of penalties and fines, those basically needs to be done. Okay? Only then will we go for a kind of a gaming industry which contributes to the economy, but under the legal process. Okay? And here, awareness raising campaigns need to be launched. Awareness raising campaigns across the country about the pitfalls, if there are, okay, across the masses. That also needs to come just like a statutory warning. So these mechanisms, if they are brought about, then there can be light at the end of the day. Okay, that brings us to the next article, and that is global surgery, why access to essential surgery is important. Now, this is an article which talks about that how across the globe, while we talk about the various communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, the impact on the health burden of low-income countries due to these diseases, oftentimes one ignores the role played by surgery in order to treat an individual. The estimates indicate that close to around 17 million deaths in 2010 alone, close to around 17 million deaths happened because proper timely surgery could not be done. And surgery of basic types. Surgery, when you talk about anesthesia, trauma, obstetrics, that is during the childbirth or the midwife condition. So in those cases, there, if you do surgery, many of the various illnesses, they are avoidable. Many of the various health hazards, they are avoidable. So timely surgery is required. But when we talk about this timely surgery, there comes the lack of access. People in the developing countries or the low-income countries, they don't have that access to timely surgeries. Here, indicators basically do point out, the various reports, they do point out that here, close to around 96% of the population in the low and mid-income countries and 99% of the population in low-income countries, this is for low income, and low and mid income. So this huge amount of population has got no access, timely access to surgery is not there at all. So you can imagine the amount and the number of lives that we are losing on an annual basis, on a daily basis. So that is where comes in the entire concept of global surgery. Now this global surgery, the genesis of it has been put forward, or if you think about it, for decades now, there has been the global exchange of ideas and practices in order to have these surgeries efficient, affordable, and accessible as well. But still, ever since 2015, various different reports were published. That was the inflection point where significant amount of these surgeries, they increased across the globe. But here, what is the global surgery? What of it is needed to be understood? So, it is the study and the practice of improving access to timely, quality, and affordable surgical care. This is relevant for your, this definition is relevant for your prelims. Now, it emphasizes horizontal health systems across the various verticals, strengthening through addressing a range of various health challenges, particularly in vulnerable population. And this basically helps you if you are providing fair, equitable, accessible healthcare in the form of surgical inputs. If you are providing that to the population, it helps you achieve various different sustainable development goals. First of all, SDG 1, elimination to poverty. SDG 3, ensuring good health and well-being. SDG 8, promoting decent work and economic growth. Why? Because if you don't provide immediate access and intervention with the help of the surgery or the medical intervention, the loss to the exchequer is also very high, to the tune of close to around $14 trillion, the estimates of the study indicates. We will take a look at that. And reducing inequalities as per SDG 5 and 10. So these SDGs, how equitable access to healthcare and global surgery, how they can help the larger population and help us in achieving SDG. This will be relevant in your mains and in your essay paper as well as for your GS3 directly. Okay, you should know about these particular SDGs and their numbers. Now, it primarily is concentrated and the entire endeavor is concentrated in the low and low mid income countries. It also focuses on the inequalities which are present in the high income countries, because please understand, while we have discussed that 99% of the population in the low income, 96% of the population in the low and mid income countries, they did not have access to safe surgery at the time of requirement. 24% of the population in high income countries, even they did not have the access, because of the rising healthcare costs and also lack of equitability. There is a large economic divide which is still persistent. So it includes the basics of SOTA, that is the general surgery, obstetrics, trauma, and anesthesia. Other than that, around 30 different other basic surgical methods and practices which are brought in to bring about a preventive care, or also to take care of certain illnesses right at the bud. So these are basically included in your general surgery. Now the genesis of general surgery, as I told you, goes back decades, but the true development of this practice of global surgery across the world, developing an affordable system and providing that surgical input, that started coming in from the year 2015 onwards, ever since the World Bank sponsored a network or commissioned basically disease control priority network amongst the healthcare professionals. Other than that, the Lancet Commission on Global Survey, that was also commissioned, that also highlighted certain important viewpoints, such as 5 billion people lack the timely access to safe and affordable surgical care. 5 billion out of a population of 7.5. Think about it. Out of this, close to around 1.6 billion is in South Asia itself. 1.6 billion people in South Asia, they don't get that affordable care. Then 96 to 99% of the population in low and mid-income countries, they face access gaps. 24% face access gap in high-income countries. And as indicated, in 2010, 17 million deaths were attributed to these gaps. While this brings about a significant amount of challenge in the socio-economic progress of any particular nation, one has to understand that there are direct economic implications as well. For example, annual loss in societal welfare was close to around $14.5 trillion for 175 countries as an estimate. On purchasing power parity terms, the loss is presumed, so the cumulative projected loss is presumed to be close to around $20 trillion by the year 2030. In terms of the economic output, the economic progress, the loss to the GDP due to loss of production, etc., many families are pushed into impoverishment. In a country like India, you have to understand that 70% of, as per the report of the World Bank, 70% of out-of-pocket expense for the general household in rural country is on healthcare. Think about it. 70% of your expenditure, if it is on healthcare, then you are left with a very meager income. You will never be able to translate from a low-income household to a mid-income or from a mid-income to a high income. So that is where the role of global surgeries, they come into prominence, they come into play. Okay? So what as a country we need to do? Here as a country we need to take certain learning pointers. First of all, whenever national health policy, etc., these are declared, it is understandable that our priorities are communicable diseases, various different issues of malnutrition, etc., having institutional birth of children, etc. Surgeries are not given that importance in National Health Mission. The National Arogya Mission basically did have many of the surgeries done, but there needs to be not only the availability of the trained professionals at the district level that needs to be there, but also there needs to be a clear-cut policy intervention at the state level also. The state level, not much of it is happening other than a few states. Not much of the progress has happened when it comes to health interventions at the state level. So surgical interventions at the state level, district level, local level, that needs to be promoted, and the government needs to provide the societal incentive for that. Okay? Now we come to certain articles relevant only for your prelims. So this is the article where the Prime Minister or the government is about to release 540 crores for the PM JANMAN beneficiaries. Now what is that PM JANMAN? So it is Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan. So quite recently, that is in November, the government and the Prime Minister had launched the Pradhan Mantri Abhiyan in order to upgrade and uplift the lives of the various PVTGs and the tribal groups. So that is where this PM JANMAN Abhiyan comes into place. This is relevant for your prelims. The comprehensive campaign has initially been started in 100 districts covering approximately 500 blocks and 15,000 PVTGs inhabitants across 18 states. Phase 2 of the program will cover rest of the district. So what is this program about? This is to bring about various benefits such as Aadhaar card, community certificate, Jan Dhan accounts. Everything will be given to them. Many of the social schemes, they do not reach the larger section, the last section of the population. So that is why last section in the sense of social upliftment and social progress, economic and social progress. So here they will be provided with these so that they can have the benefit associated with the social sector schemes such as Ayushman card, providing them health benefits, PM Kisan Samman Nidhi, Kisan credit card, so that there can be an institutionalization and a proper mechanism to monitor the progress that they have been making. So they will ensure to cover every PVTG household that has remained unreached, lack of road and digital connectivity, which has curtailed that reach till now, will be taken care of. Places like Hard Bazaar, CSC, Gram Panchayat, Anganwadi, etc., they will be the nodes through which these developmental initiatives will be brought towards the PVTG and the tribal population. So that is the detail of PM JANMAN initiative or the beneficiaries associated. Then, rising sea, shrinking sand erode the vibrancy of the Ganga Sagar Mela. Now, the Ganga Sagar Mela, which is basically held every year around 14th of January, that is this time, at the time of Makar Sankranti. Now, here people take the dip in the holy water or that holy dip which is considered around midnight, and that is done almost every year by lakhs of devotees who reach that region of Ganga Sagar annually. Now, for the past couple of years, rising sea level and coastal erosion have basically marred many of the places and has destroyed many of these traditional pilgrim centers in these regions of the Ganga Sagar Islands. Now here, recently, one thing which came to light was that the temple had started submerging. The temple of Kapil Muni had started submerging, and the local inhabitants, they basically say that this has happened in the past as well, where the previous temples which were built, they have completely submerged. So there have been multiple such temples which have been built. All of them, slowly and steadily, the sea level is rising and the sea is coming inwards. Now, as the sea is coming inwards, it is taking up the coastal sand as well. It is depositing a lot of mud and marsh on that. Now, this in the light of the time when the West Bengal government is actively pitching for the Ganga Sagar Mela to be declared as a national fair in order to give it some amount of recognition, in order to provide larger amount of tourist footfalls. That does not bode well. That is where, in order to prevent that coastal erosion, tetrapods have been installed and the tetrapods have been brought about. So what are these tetrapods? So these kind of concrete structures that you see, these act as a kind of a sea wall, and they end up preventing the coastal erosion. Various different countries install these, from Japan to Netherlands. Various different countries install this. We have also installed it in many parts of our country. So across the coastline of the western coast, eastern coast, many of the areas you have seen these tetrapods. These are being installed as of now. So this is one of the mechanism which can be brought ahead to prevent that coastal erosion. Why is that relevant? Because coastal erosion is also very prominently in discussion because of loss of coastal land in Sriharikota, right? The satellite launch station that we have in our country. So Sriharikota is also experiencing this in significant quantity. So coastal erosion becomes pertinent for news, and that is where the measures to stop coastal erosion also becomes prominent. It is during the monsoon months in the region of the Sundarbans Delta and the Ganga Sagar region where that coastal erosion is very prominent because of excess amount of water brought by the rivers, combined river of Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna. They bring in large amount of water, so that drains out many of these sediments, but they will deposit it somewhere else, or they would deposit mud and marshes, making that region unutilizable. Okay. Now the last topic of the day. Government calls for nominations for Rashtriya Vigyaan Puraskar. So here what is relevant for you to know is that this Rashtriya Vigyaan Puraskar has been brought in after phasing out multiple different awards which were given by different institutions randomly. So this is a kind of an institutionalized mechanism of giving those awards. Now here the point to note is that this award, last date of filing of this nomination, each of these milestones for this award has got a prominence. So the last date for filing the nominations is Feb 28, which is the National Science Day. Science Day. Then after that, the award will be announced on May 11. Award will be announced. This is National Technology Day. Then after that, again, the awards will be conferred. So this will be announced. This will be conferred or given on August 23, which is National Space Day. Okay? Match the following kind of questions can be framed from this area. Now, this award does not involve any cash incentive. Citation and a medal will be handed out. So, from here also, multiple statement question can be framed for your prelims. Now, we come to the questions. So, the type of questions which can be framed, while an essay type of question can be framed about the portion of counter-terrorism and the approach. Here, what is meant by the term global surgery? Discuss its role in improving the healthcare conditions in developing nations. So in this, how do you address this question? In the introduction, you mention about global surgery, what it is, and the aspect of SOTA also. That surgery, obstetrics, then anesthesia and trauma. These and few of the basic practices are covered under this global surgery. That will be your introduction. In the body part, you start by writing that the endeavor is to provide equitable and affordable healthcare benefits to the larger population. And you have to substantiate that why it is needed. Because the second part of the question is, discuss its role in improving healthcare conditions. So it must be doing something to improve the healthcare conditions. So what is it doing? So talk about lack of access. Around 96 to 99% of the population in low and low middle income countries, they don't have the access to safe surgeries. So what if they don't have access to safe surgeries? In 2010, the estimates indicate that 17 million casualties happened because of lack of access to safe preventive surgeries. Much higher figure than what HIV/AIDS claims on an annual basis, or much higher figure, for example, when we talk about the entire COVID pandemic, what it claimed across the entire country during that period of time, much higher figure than that. So it is a grave situation. So that is why it is required, particularly in these nations. That is where the healthcare policy and the health plans at the state level, at the district level needs to evolve, where you need to have these surgical setups at the district level, provision of framework mechanism, regulations by availability of staff members, paramedical staff, everything you can highlight. Discuss the need to regulate the online gaming industry in India. So in the introduction here, you talk about the status of the gaming industry first. Only then will you be able to justify why it is required to be regulated. So in the intro, talk about what this online gaming industry, what kind of a giant it is. 373 million potential users. Second largest internet user base. 82% of the time spent is on the case of media and entertainment, right? 27% annual CAGR growth indicated by the online gaming industry. A potential to add $300 billion to Indian economy by the year 26-27. These things you highlight, which indicates what a behemoth that this is. Then talk about the concerns that we have highlighted. Mental trauma, addiction, suicide rates amongst teenagers particularly, then also money laundering practices, give certain data pointers and highlight this. Okay, so that is all for today's discussion. Before saying goodbye, a couple of announcements again. A gentle reminder for the one-to-one counseling session. Any details, any doubts that you have for your preparation of civil services, how to initiate, whether to initiate or not, which portion to cover, feel free to have a discussion with our counselor. That will be attained or that will be achievable. Just fill out the Google form present in the description link below. You can fill it out and make your path to civil services much easier. Secondly, I do recommend, advise all of you that after this analysis, do go to the Telegram channel, take up the multiple choice questions and thereby assess your level of understanding. That will be all from my side today. Till we meet again, do take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you.